and gentlemen, 4:30 has arrived. Once again, thanks so much for making us a part of your day today. My name is Alex. I'm inside the habitat. And I'd just like you here for the 4:30 Beluga show, but is anyone excited? Yeah. Alright, we can work with it. That's pretty good. Although I should mention, just in terms of, well, what exactly are we going to be seeing here? If you've caught any of our dolphin programs today, those dolphins, yes, they're very acrobatic animals, and if you're thinking, well, these are even larger, they should be able to jump twice as high. Probably not going to happen, because these are belugas. They're not nearly as acrobatic, but they're a very fascinating animal. And we're going to spend the next 10 to 12 minutes or so getting to know them a little bit better. And why? Well, just by a show of hands, is this anyone's very first time even seeing a beluga whale? Don't be embarrassed, look around. It is somewhat surprising. These are actually Canada's most abundant whale. And if you happen to consider yourself well learned in terms of animal matters, yeah, why don't we see these guys every day? Well, we'll be going over a little bit about that as well. But helping us, moving into the habitat, ladies and gentlemen, we have two of our marine mammal trainers, two of our best over on the far side, standing on water. How is that even possible? We have the lovely Kristen. And coming around behind me, we have Bobby. Woo! Just thought I'd chuck that in there. Chances are you're not here to see us. You're probably here to see the whales. And yes, we do have two of them that we'll be working with, and their names are Keela and Aurora. Keela's working here with Bobby, Aurora on the far side with Kristen. And if you're wondering, well, how can I tell them apart whenever you're not here to tell me who they are? Well, with these two, it's a little bit more difficult than it should be, because they're actually mother and daughter. And so, yes, there are some genetic, they look similar. But Keela, closest to us, she's got a little bit more gray coloration around her eyes and her blowhole around her neck, as opposed to Aurora, which is a little more white. And that's because these animals are born gray, and they get whiter and whiter as they get older. And that should give you some indication, if you don't already know, where do you find beluga whales? Does anyone know which ocean here in Canada? Where are we hiding all these beluga whales if they're so abundant? The Arctic, yes. And generally speaking, you don't think of whales when you think Arctic. You think cold, you think ice, you think this place is one inhospitable environment. And generally speaking, yeah, it's certainly one of the colder places here in Canada, obviously. But the animals that live there, they like it just fine, thank you very much. And in particular, belugas are known to be able to put on quite a few pounds, even living in a really cold place. Up to 30-40% of their body mass is actually made up of blubber. And as you watch these animals, you get an idea that, well, hello, you're pushing a lot of blubber around. How do they do that? Well, they got tails, just like other whales or dolphins. However, they're not nearly as, well, large as perhaps some other whales or dolphins out there. Now, one of the reasons we think their tails are so small is to minimize the amount of heat that could potentially be lost from these areas. Because you and I are the same. If we don't have gloves or a toque on, our fingers, our ears, they get cold because, well, we don't have any insulation on these areas. Likewise with these guys, small little tails. However, they are still quite powerful. And if you watch, they can use those small but powerful tails to leap into the sky! Or maybe halfway! Which is still pretty impressive, because when you consider these animals are wrapped in a mattress of fat to be able to do this. Oh! I can't do that. And it's not nearly a mattress, but that's a round of applause for our very energetic, remarkable belugas. Now, as I mentioned, yes, there are animals that do live in the Arctic. Whales are just one of them. There are, of course, people. People have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years and have done quite well, thank you very much, by being able to find vitamins and nutrients in some rather interesting places. Because most of us, we would get scurvy in no time, because we'd be looking for a store, looking for fruits, looking for vegetables, not finding too much. However, if you look into our habitats, you may notice 800 to 900 kilograms worth of not only protein, but also vitamins and nutrients. And generally speaking, we don't look at these animals as a food source. However, Inuit have been living the 100-mile diet for a lot longer than has been fashionable down here. In large part because, well, it's a necessity living up in the Arctic. And it's known that, yes, the blubber on these animals, known as muktak, on seals, on walruses, it does have some of the same vitamin and nutrient content that you and I get from fruits and vegetables. But do belugas care where our fruits and vegetables come from? I mean, why are we even talking about diets and eating whales. Well, no, they don't understand the thing we say, so it's not as if they're worried about it. However, some of the decisions we make, even way down here in Vancouver, they do affect communities and the animals up to the north. Because we know, well, things like the 100-mile diet, one of the several energy conservation initiatives out there, we know that, yes, climate change is being felt in the Arctic. And belugas, how does this affect them? Well, their food chain starts out on the ice. And if you look in our exhibit, you'll notice algae growing around the edges, completely natural, completely normal. Well, in the Arctic, it actually grows on the ice itself. And while these animals know they don't eat ice, they don't eat algae, they need something a little more substantial. Well, there's small things that eat the algae, bigger things eat those things, small fish, bigger fish, really big fish, and then really big mammals at the top of the food chain, just like there are down here. And so yes, some of the decisions we make, even way down here, they are affecting the animals that are to the north. However, you can't talk about belugas and not mention a population of belugas that is to the east of us. And if we have anyone visiting from Ontario or Quebec or even anywhere around the Great Lakes region, you may be surprised to find out that the Great Lakes drain down through the St. Lawrence Basin and pass by a small group of beluga whales. And while people that live in that part of the world probably aren't looking at these animals as a food source necessarily, they are, well, people do go out and actually try and find them because people love whales for one reason or another. And yes, there are different whale watching outfits involved in actually trying to spot the beluga whales. However, chances are you're not going to see the whales doing a lot of the behaviors that our belugas are doing here because, well, no, as I mentioned at the beginning, they're not a terribly acrobatic species. You may see them swimming around. You may see the tails coming up. You may only get to see their backsides, or in particular, their dorsal side. And if you're familiar with whales, you know that, well, you can identify certain whales by their dorsal fins, if you can get a decent picture of them, because they're individual to each animal. Well, the dorsal ridges on these animals, yes, they are individual. They've got nicks and cuts and scrapes that are individual to each animal. However, if you're not looking for this, you may not see it until you're literally, well, it's too late. And that's one of the reasons why the St. Lawrence population isn't that large, is several individuals are involved in ship strikes every year because people don't see them until it's too late. And living downstream in the Great Lakes of some of the largest cities in North America, it's not the cleanest body of water. There's a lot of toxins, a lot of pollutants. So then it begs the question, well, why do the belugas stay there? Well, it's a unique area geographically. It's known as an estuary, where lakes, rivers get stirred up, lots of nutrients in the water, a lot of energy available. And yeah, these animals, they're big, they're blubbery, they need lots of food, they need lots of energy. And it's also unique in that, well, there's a lot of shallow areas. And looking at our exhibit, you may wonder, well, do these animals use these estuary-like settings? Do they use the shallow areas? They're whales. Whales don't go into shallow water. Well, yes and no. For belugas, they do. As I mentioned, they're born gray, and as they get older, that white skin, well, they have to lose that gray skin somewhere. So these animals will spend a lot of time in shallow water, kind of using the ground as a loofah sponge to get rid of some of that gray skin. And then, yeah, they are able to get into really shallow water and then get out again. And if you're watching Aurora over on the far side, especially from underwater, her belly is pretty much right up against the ground, which is quite unique for whales, because usually once they're beached, that's it, they're done. And being a very murky body of water as well, if you are born gray, it's a great place to hide. You can not only hide from predators, you can hide from your mother. But usually, the mothers can find them because they can use sound to actually paint a picture of their surrounding. And if you listen closely, every now and again we can get a small sampling of some of the vocals our belugas are capable of. Very nice. A round of applause for the singing belugas. Now, as far as we know, these are actually the most vocal of any marine mammal out there. They can make lots of noises that we can't hear outside of the range of our hearing, a lot of noises we can hear. And they learn similar to the way you and I learned, by copying the sounds of the animals around them. So every now and again we like to encourage our guests, all right, let's all pretend we're belugas. If you heard an interesting sound and you want to practice, now is your chance. Pick the favorite noise. Let's get a crowd of belugas going. Here we go. 1, 2,